Ready to revolutionize your higher ed marketing game?
Yes.
Well, then don't miss out on Element 451's Engage Summit, June 27 and 28. Explore the cutting edge world of education and AI technology and unleash your creativity like never before. Register today at engage.element451.com and use promo code EdUp50 for $50 off. The global gathering for educators and institutions is here. Anthology Together is where inspiration, connection, networking, and EdTech insight and innovation intersect into the premier event destination for the global education community. Registration is open. Go to anthologytogether.com. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio back with you on another episode today. I'm a little rusty. I'm coming off a weekend. For those of you listening, you won't know this because I will edit it out. I messed up my own introduction of the podcast. Couldn't say the name of the podcast or our tagline right. But that's what happens sometimes when you come off a weekend, when you get rest and you got to reinvigorate your brain. One way to get your brain back on track is to get your copy of Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education, which thousands of higher ed folks have, administrators, faculty, staff have gone on to buy. And we are so proud and so honored that we can be a part of the conversation in that way. Of course, that book was born from the first 125 presidents we interviewed on this podcast, and we continue to have amazing people come to the microphone, which means, I guess it means eventually we'll have to write another book or two. But who knows? Who knows? But the conversations will continue here on the EdUp Experience. And one person that helps me continue these conversations, he's back yet again. He requested his sound effect. I guess it's his now. As I've used it many times for him. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He's Bill Pepicello. He is the former president of the University of Phoenix and higher ed vagabond, if you will. Bill, what's going on?
Hey, Joe, how you doing? I'll try not to mess up my introduction. You did, of course, forget to mention that I have my own podcast, which is EdUp Insights. The most recent episode just dropped.
And how could I forget? I just didn't, my brain didn't even get there. It was like, it wasn't the first thing on my agenda, but it was the second thing after I introduced myself.
Well, and the next thing on your agenda ought to be to remind people that I also have a book called Leadership on the Field of Play available to Amazon.
I do have a copy of that book here sitting on my bookshelf. I reference it often.
Everyone should. But okay, I've got my own shameless plugs in, but it's good to be with you. I'm especially happy to be here today because of our guest who embodies a lot of things that you and I talk about on a regular basis. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, let's get him in right now because he's been waiting and he has a microphone better than mine, which means he's done a few of these conversations. I love his mic. Look at that setup he's got. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. He is Dr. Wally Boston. He's President Emeritus from American Public University System and now General Partner at Green Street Impact Partners. What's going on, Wally? How are you?
Hi, Joe. Hi, Bill. Great to see you all this morning. I'm just sitting back taking advantage of the May weather in Austin before it becomes the June weather in Austin. And, it's a nice day here and talking about things related to higher ed and education in general always interests me.
Well, let's talk about the work you're doing right now, because, it's funny that you were one of the first, would take this back a little bit, the connective thread. When Silicon Valley Bank closed, it was really just a week or two afterwards. And I think, I don't remember how I did, but I posted something in LinkedIn and said, what about all the money in ed tech? Because there's a lot of companies that were doing, business at Silicon Valley Bank. And I said, yeah, now you guys might watch the decline here of dollars flowing in ed tech. And you hit me back right away and you're like, I wouldn't be so sure about that because there's a lot of companies out there doing pretty amazing things. So talk about Green Street Impact Partners and what you're doing.
Thank you. So Green Street Impact Partners is a new fund, but we have people who are partners who are not new to education. So among my partners from the education background are Bill Hansen, former Deputy Secretary of Education and founder of Strata Education Network. Also, as I understand it, a former colleague of Bill's related to the University of Phoenix and Prodosio and many other things. Amy Bevilacqua, who was my chief innovation officer at American Public Education, and myself. And then we have David Warnock, who co-founded Camden Partners, a private equity firm headquartered in Baltimore, and Calvin Young, who worked with David at Camden.
Epic.
So what is it that you're looking for? What's this fund doing, and how are you assessing? And, tell me about the work.
Well, we're looking for companies that are growth companies. We're not doing startups, but at the same time, they don't have to have profits. We'd prefer that they have a track to profitability in about 18 months, and but we're focused more on growth rates and their ability to help whatever company they serve, or whatever sector of the industry they serve, to scale or make them more efficient and save money over the long run. So really impactful, growth-oriented ed tech companies. They can be in higher ed, they can be in workforce development, or they can be in K-12. I have to be pretty candid, though. My partners and I have not as much involvement in K-12 as we do in higher ed and workforce development. And I would also add that with all the school districts across the country being very independent in their thinking, it's harder to scale a company in the K through 12 sector.
Yeah, there's a lot of hoops, if you will, to get through too. What would you say to the folks that go, really higher ed right now, you're going to invest in higher ed and ed tech around higher ed? I mean, declining enrollment, picture's not so bright, values being questioned, so on and so on. Is now the time to really be investing in higher ed?
Well, we're not investing in higher ed directly. So we're not looking for companies that actually have eligibility to participate in Title IV, whether it's through accreditation or otherwise. Well, we are looking for companies that can help those entities scale or be more impactful. I read a ton, so I know all the looming demographic cliff and all the disruption that's coming, and don't disagree that there will be a lot of disruption coming. At the same time, I'm a big believer in niches, and if any institution out there thinks that they're going to be successful by sort of copying everybody else and offering the same business program that everybody else offers, that's probably a recipe for disaster. So niches really work. For example, at APUS, our niche was serving active duty military and veterans, and we did a great job of that and did it for many years and still do it. And I think that if you look at some of the ed tech companies that are out there, there are some that are being really innovative and bringing partnerships together between large companies and their workforce training. One company I can think of that we don't have an investment in is a company called PathStream. And there are other companies that can help colleges and universities leverage degrees, for example, through course sharing. So those are the type of companies we're looking for, because we think that they can be successful and they can make their clients be successful.
Nailed it.
Now, Bill, I know you want to ask questions, but I'm not sure if I want to let you in yet, because I feel like the two of you are going to get together, and there's just so much connective tissue that I'm just going to end up taking a back seat to the remainder of this episode.
Well, as well you should.
Don't worry about me.
But there are a lot of things that we get to talk about in our shared history, but there are some things that I think are instructive for listeners here, because Wally has several really interesting pieces to his resume. And one is, Wally, Joe and I talk a lot about leadership and where leaders are coming from in higher education, where they're going to come from, where they're taking us. And in that regard, you have a really interesting resume, because you weren't a dean and a provost, and then you ascended to a presidency and a CEO position. So I think it's interesting for people to hear a little bit about how you got to APUS, because it was not a straight academic journey.
Sure. That sounds great, Bill. So like like many people, I thought my academic journey was over when I got an MBA back in the late 70s. And I had a fairly successful career with Price Waterhouse and then a number of healthcare companies as either their CFO, COO, or CEO. And the healthcare business, as you might know, during the 80s and 90s was, consolidated. So many of the big hospital chains, long-term care chains, pharmacy chains, all grew by acquisition. I was part of that from a leadership team. And when I finished my last healthcare assignment in early 2002, I thought I would just take a deep breath and say, I'm tired of consolidating, and I want to look at a different way of growing and a different industry and a different sector. And fortunately, I was introduced to the founder of APUS, a guy named Jim Etter, who, as you may know, APUS originally started as American Military University back in '93. And Jim had a vision, and it was really a great vision. I wasn't so sure, by the way, about the legitimacy of online education, primarily because I had not experienced online education. The two private institutions that I graduated from were, fairly decent institutions, but online wasn't part of their vocabulary or even part of their degree offerings in 2002. And so I made a deal with Jim that I would come on as an executive, and at the same time, he needed to allow me to pick a course, any course that I wanted to at random, and I would take that course while I was working for him. And at the end of that trial period, if I felt like this was something that I could support from a quality perspective, I'd agree to sign on permanently. And so I did that in 2002, and I have to admit, the course was really rigorous. I don't think I was prepared for the reading and writing that I had to do in this course. And by the way, it was oriented towards APUS's it was a course in national security studies, and it familiarized me with all of the congressional acts that form part of our national security apparatus. But after that, I jumped in with both feet, and while I was initially the CFO in 2004, I succeeded Jim as CEO and president, and I actually went back to Penn and earned my doctorate. So
Excellent.
it was a little bit of a different way, a little different way to go, but all rewarding and enjoyable, particularly for the difference that we made to a lot of students.
And that's one of the things that Joe and I talk about is that, I although I didn't end up in a very traditional way, I came up through traditional higher ed and was a dean and so on and so forth before I came to University of Phoenix. And so one of the things that we're interested in is seeing people who take a path like you and letting other folks know that, you can have an interest and you can have a talent and you can have that leadership ability that will you to places where you might not have thought that you would go. Now, one follow-up, and then I'll throw it back to you, Joe, because I know that you want to get some of the more of the rust off and actually do some podcasting here.
Nailed it.
One of the things that you are an expert in, Wally, is retention of online post-secondary students. And I wonder if you could talk to that just a little bit about what you know and have learned about retaining online students, since that's a really hot topic these days.
Sure. You've done your research, Bill. So that was actually why I went back to school to get my doctorate at Penn. I could not find enough literature, research papers, or whatever on online student retention. So someone told me about the program at Penn that I could do it part-time while I was still president of APUS. And my dissertation was initially on how to measure student retention in online programs. And, you sort of got to define the basics before you go from there. So among my many findings is that certainly in the majority of instances to date, most online students have been working adult students. So the profile of the student who's an online working adult who's taking online courses is very similar to working adults who are going to a regular school part-time. There are some subtle differences in the way the courses are taught, obviously, but the background of the student, and if you look at a lot of the retention literature, whether you're going back to Tinto or not, certainly student background characteristics, their life experiences influence their ability to persist. And in online, that's a big factor as well. For example, one of the findings that I had early on was that students who didn't transfer credit didn't graduate as frequently as students who did transfer credit. And I thought that was a bit odd. But then when I looked at the profiles of the students, our average student, and I'm sure yours at the University of Phoenix was pretty similar, was over 30. The average age was over 30. And so they had tried college somewhere else. And so when they didn't transfer credit, there were one of two things, but generally when they didn't transfer credit and they were over 30, it wasn't because they had never attended college before. It was either because they had not been successful at college, and so they had flunked courses and didn't have credits to transfer, or, and this was a phenomenon that took me a while to learn about, they were a swirling student. And I'm sure you're familiar with swirling students. I don't know that Joe is.
No, but it sounds like you should trademark it, whatever it is.
I shouldn't get credit. I believe the first literature that I read about swirling students was written by a faculty member at Indiana University. But the idea there are several reasons why you swirl, but swirling means that you have a home institution, and if it's my institution that you're attending my institution because I happen to be offering courses right now that are either priced right or the right course, and you're going to transfer them back to that home institution. And or it could be simply that there is no stigma to dropping out of online. So that embarrassment that perhaps our colleagues at the traditional universities we attended of someone leaving the dorm at the end of winter semester and packing all their stuff and not coming back, that's not there in online. The course ends and you have no idea whether you're going to see some of the people in your class or not the next term. So what I ultimately attributed that particular factor with why people with no transfer credit hardly graduated was that most of those people were swirling students. They were coming to us for credit that was going to go elsewhere, or in the case of those who are active duty military, there are levels of their enlistment where you get certain promotions based on academic credits accumulated. And they had determined that, and basically the max you get at the non-commissioned officer is at 60 credit hours, which is the equivalent of an associate's degree. And so they just determined that going beyond 60 credit hours was not worth it at that point in time. And all of those reasons are very tough to explain and tease out on an application. So you have to do a lot of work over time to figure it out.
Don't settle for average marketing strategies. Join us at the Element 451 Engage Summit, June 27 and 28, and discover how to harness the power of AI technology in higher ed marketing. Connect with industry leaders, explore cutting-edge technologies, and future-proof your marketing strategy. Use promo code EdUp50 for $50 off. Register now at engage.element451.com. The premier EdTech event is right around the corner.
Epic.
Anthology Together is the destination for visionaries, educators, and learners ready to unleash the power of education technology. EdUp will be on site for the thought-provoking keynotes, peer-driven discussions, and unparalleled networking opportunities. We guarantee you will leave inspired and connected. You don't want to miss it. Book your tickets to Nashville for AT23, July 17th to July 20th. Register today at anthologytogether.com. I do want to just double down on that point you made, because I've never heard anybody say it quite like you just did, that there isn't a stigma to dropping out of online school? Maybe because you never really intend to drop out, you're just taking a break. And there's a big difference on our perspective of that, where if you're leaving your traditional residential environment, there is some perceived like pack up process that has, the shaming almost of I'm leaving. With online, I'm just taking a break. I'm just taking a term or two off. I'll get back in. Maybe I never have the intention to get back in, but I don't have to explain myself in a way that maybe a traditional student would. That is really an interesting perspective. And when you think about that, I just had a moment. I was like, oh yeah, like I guess I knew that, but I've never heard anybody put it so plainly like that. Maybe that's why really retention in an online environment doesn't have that, I don't know, that leverage, so to speak, that you would have maybe in a traditional environment where it's like, hey, if you leave school, maybe you'll never be back. And that student goes, maybe you're right. But in an online, it's like, oh no, I'm just taking a break. I'll be back. And it's hard to convince somebody out of the fact that maybe they won't be, right?
Well, and as Bill can tell you, I mean, it is in our reputational interest as a serious academic institution to try to get as many students across the line that you can get across the line. But I think it was Alexander Aston who in one of his early books about student persistence talked about that the definition of completion is in the student's mind. So the definition of completion for a student may not be the definition of completion for either of the three of us. It may be they want to complete 2 classes. They just want to learn a little bit more to help them out in their job. And we're going to see more and more of this as we see this reskilling and upskilling, where it's less about a degree and it's more about learning and that type of thing. But I do want to add that one difference, particularly for those of us that have spent a lot of time in online education, is that you want to be able to meet the students' needs when they are ready to come back. And so that's why we did monthly starts at APUS, and I believe University of Phoenix did monthly starts. That's why there's some, at least 2 that I know of, that do weekly starts. And that's I salute people that can do weekly starts, but at APUS we did monthly starts, and so we were able to, all of our students were able to know that when they had to drop out, either because of a work assignment, like they were deployed somewhere, or a family reason, they were having a new member of the family, a baby, they could come back, and they could come back on their own schedule, because the first Monday of every single month, 12 months of the year, we offered a semester start.
Right, because if you tell that student, you know what, you got to wait 3 months before the start date comes up, that adult working learner is going to go, okay, I'll be there. And then simultaneously, and 5 minutes later, they're going to call the other university down the road that has monthly starts, and they're going to go there. And so it's funny that you mentioned that, Wally, because in my current work at Lindenwood University, we are launching a set of programs in non-term and non-standard terms so we can move to monthly starts. And it's funny because you get in these conversations with people, and one of the first things, everybody wants to serve the adult learner market right now. 40 million, some college, no degree, which of course a lot of those students will never come back to school. But of the ones that will, you want to serve them, but you can't serve them with a traditional model. You can't. It doesn't work. And so when I first came to Lindenwood in these conversations, one of the things that came up right away is, how are we going to serve them? Well, you got to go to monthly starts. You have to go to more frequent inputs, or else you're not going to even have a chance to get in the game, right? Isn't that the truth? Because the adult student doesn't wait.
They don't wait. And by the way, that may be one of the reasons why they're swirling. They might actually give you a second chance, but they went to my institution because I had the course that they needed at the time they wanted it.
So talk about, go ahead, Bill.
I just want to jump in real quick, and then I'll throw it back to you, because Wally made a point that, again, is something that you and I talk about, and it's the subject of my latest episode on EdUp Insights.
Amazing.
And
That's 2 plugs, by the way. Well done.
Thank you. He mentioned that sometimes the education has to be less about degrees. And if you look at APUS, they have degrees, they have certifications, and they have something called a NanoCert, which are sort of mini certifications. And so they're talking about things that you and I have been talking about very recently. You need to serve people with what they need, not just when they need it.
Right, Bill. And Bill, as you're aware, and I'm assuming Joe is too, the reason we have NanoCerts at APUS is because more than 70% of our students are not using Title IV. And so Title IV requires a certificate to be 15 hours or more, which means it needs to be at least 5 or 6 classes. But because more than 70% of our students don't use Title IV, we're able to have NanoCerts. And NanoCert is just it's an experience and a learning experience that we think is relevant to that particular discipline. And it can be 2, it can be 3, it can be 4. I mean, it doesn't have to be the same size. But the reason it's a NanoCert is it's not 15 credit hours, so it doesn't meet the Title IV certificate.
Right. Sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say Wally's a student of the game. And Wally, I say that because you're very active on social media. You share, you write, you're opinionated. You see the discourse going on around higher ed right now, degrees versus non-degrees, value, ROI, all these concepts. And, it came up, I was on this call with a bunch of folks last week. And one of the things that came up, and it was this, the Google certifications, that more and more people are taking Google certs. Well, I've interviewed the founder of Google certs twice. And on the second time, she said there was 2 phenomenons happening. One, their biggest growing student segment is the 4-year degree student coming back to get a Google cert, not the student who doesn't have a degree getting a Google cert. And 2, and this one is the one that was most interesting, is that they're trying to partner with as many universities as possible because students want credit for the Google cert. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Where are we right now? What do you see? There's so much confusion out there for students, for universities, for non-credit, for credit providers. And where do we sit? Is the degree the conversation still? Is it still the central part of the higher ed conversation?
So I'm going to be one of these people that actually, I'm going to start off with my answer of saying that if you can afford the time and money to get a 4-year degree, you should. Because I believe that we go through cycles, and while it's clear that there are some employers that have removed their 4-year degree requirement, and even some states, my good friend Wes Moore, who's a newly elected governor of the state of Maryland, removed that requirement in Maryland. The fact of the matter is that if you're playing the long game, I believe this is a cycle. And I particularly believe that as jobs are eliminated through AI, and so there will be more people looking for jobs than, and sadly, some of them won't be prepared for this, that, people are going to look at a person's credentials. And unless they have a lot of very specific experience that's relevant to a job, they're going to look for an excuse. If they get 60 applications, they're going to look for an excuse to put some of them in that round filing container. And, so I think everyone who can afford it and who has the time should ultimately try to get a 4-year degree. That said, I have a daughter who graduated from college last year, and, I recommended that she get the Google certificate in digital marketing because she's not sure whether she wants to go to grad school or not. And I said, well, look, your major was psychology. And I told her at the time, I said, if you're majoring in psychology, you're either going to need to get into sales and marketing, or you're going to need to go to grad school if you're seriously interested in psychology. So while she's weighing that decision, she's just about completed her Google certificate in digital marketing, and knows she's not getting credit for it, but she's going to get 7 different modules. She's getting 7 different badges for the modules she completed in that certificate on her LinkedIn profile.
That's like a classic example. That really is interesting because 4-year degree, got to get some tactical skills along the way. Now, what am I going to do? And by the way, psychology is a really fancy way to say sales and marketing too, if you're not going to do it. I always love that. But by the way, and let me say this in true sincerity, when you listen to this episode and you hear Bill Pepicello's voice, it is actually AI. I've asked ChatGPT, I said, ChatGPT, make me here's an input of sound, make yourself sound like Bill Pepicello and ask reasonably average questions. And so far it's going very well.
Thanks a lot, Joe.
See? Good
and
response.
if you could see my my video, you'd also see that I am identifying as George Clooney.
Holy crap!
But I'm going to take this in a much different direction because of all the places where Wally and I touch our careers sort of come together. One of them is accreditation. We've both had the experience of taking an institution and getting initial accreditation for it. And right now, if I'm correct, Wally, you serve on the National Advisory Committee on Institutional Quality and Integrity, known as NASICI, which for those of you who may not be familiar with it, is an advisor committee to the Department of Education that actually recommends what accreditors ought to be approved. So that sort of accredits the accreditors, if you will. And I served on that committee also for 6 years in the past. So I sort of wonder, because accreditation is coming under some attacks these days. How do you see accreditation moving forward? Do you see any changes as you sit on the committee, or what do you think?
Well, I can tell you, the public information. I'm not actually not allowed to put a position forward that's NASICI's position. But if you've sat in, and all of our meetings are open to the public, probably on the last 3 or 4 meetings, we've had a lot of discussion about our dashboard, and the dashboard was a pilot project that NASICI did back in 2014 and 15, and then when the Trump administration came in, they shut it down, and then the Biden administration restored it. And so in the restoration of it, I raised my hand and said, I'd be glad to lead a subcommittee, and so our subcommittee has reported twice publicly, and in fact, at our very last meeting, which was at the end of February, first part of March, we made several recommendations to the full NASICI committee about not only continuing the dashboards but making enhancements to the dashboards. So and by the way, anyone can go to the NASICI website and download the current version of the dashboard. So none of this is non-public information, but where the dashboard started out as a pilot, it was looking at the number of institutions that are accredited by each accrediting body, the amount of debt borrowed, the default percentage, the percentage of students who were using Pell Grants. So it was a lot of loan data. It was a lot of default graduation rates. Really simple things. So the dashboards are going to expand, and we're going to look at a rudimentary calculation of ROI. I don't know that it's exactly ROI, but just it's really loan repayment ratios based on income, and all that. Amazing. All of that data is coming from the college scorecard data set, so that's public information as well. But it'll be grouped, interestingly, in a way that the college scorecard doesn't. It'll be grouped by accreditor. And an additional part that we're doing is, if you look at the current dashboards, you'll see that the data is pretty sketchy for specialty accreditors. So for people who don't know what the term specialty accreditor is, and I certainly know you do, Bill, specialty accreditors, for example, like the American Bar Association that accredits law schools. Well, the only debt information that's listed on the ABA's dashboard relates to the standalone law schools that it accredits. And the reason for that is that under Congress's rules for accreditors being gatekeepers, they're also gatekeepers for Title IV. So an institution selects, if it has multiple accreditors, it chooses which accrediting body is its gatekeeper for Title IV. So in most cases, those accrediting bodies that were formerly regional accrediting bodies, and I say formerly because that's status was eliminated in the last administration, are most of the institutions that have law schools as a part of the university that's accredited by that formerly regional accrediting. And so the debt and the earnings for the law school grads don't show up on the dashboard for the ABA for law schools. And so we have determined as a group that we want to see that data displayed. So it takes some extra work, but hopefully it'll be done in time for our dashboards that will be public in July.
Wow, there's a lot there. One of the things that you said that I want to poke out about accreditation, because this comes up actually probably once or twice a week for me in the circles I run in, so to speak, is what do you mean that the department removed the label on regional accreditors? What are you talking about, right, Wally? Because this comes up, and I'll say to somebody, well, I think it was 2019 or early 20 where the department said any accreditor is considered a national accreditor. But what happens now is schools will say, we're regionally accredited. Here are the former regional accreditors, but we're not designated as regional accreditor anymore, or regionally accredited. Like there's this failure to adopt that all accreditors are the same. Does that make sense?
Look, Bill and I can both tell you had tons of experience in the days when there was a distinction between regional accreditors and national accreditors. And believe it or not, it was probably the one entity in the United States where regional was more prestigious, and certainly took a lot more hoops to get through. But it really related, going back to the history of accreditation. Accreditation was done regionally. So a group of schools in New England, formed the New England Association, a group of schools in the mid-Atlantic states. In fact, going way back, sometimes states accredited schools. I think New York may have been the last state to still hold out distinction in Congress or at the Department of Education for being able to separately accredit schools. But so by dropping that regional thing, to me, the bigger implication of dropping the regional nomenclature is that the department said, you are now free to go across state lines. So it used to be that the 7 regionals wouldn't accredit another institution in the US. They all had countries overseas where they would, if an institution wanted to, that was overseas, wanted to get accredited by a US accrediting body, for example, and I could be wrong in this, I think Middle States did Puerto Rico, even though
That's right.
Puerto Rico is part of the United States, and somebody did France, and basically certain countries would pick certain regionals, and all of a sudden that'd be where they hone in on. But now it's free, and so you've seen this little thing in Florida, and I'm going to try to stay out of politics, where the governor said, you know what, I don't want my Florida institutions having the same accrediting body, so when they come up for reaccreditation, they need to find somebody else now that it's available to be done. I would say he knows very little about accreditation. It is a lot of work and a lot of money to switch accreditation. So, and it only works if you're nonprofit, because a for-profit could actually lose its accredited status, which would lose its ability to process Title IV if it chose to switch.
Yikes!
Yeah, you'd to do it as a for-profit, you'd actually have to be duly accredited for a while before you dropped the other accrediting body. To me, it's too risky of a proposition for a state. So we'll see where that goes. I'm just going to leave it at that. We'll see where that requirement goes, because it's going to be much more difficult than anyone has signed up for.
Absolutely. No, I agree completely. I mean, it's not a 6-month process or a year's process to switch accreditors. Because I've done it with when I was with Argosy, we went from Southern Association to North Central, and it will take longer than the cycle for reaccreditation.
Yes, it does.
Well, I want to ask you, and you kind of taking a step back from accreditation and going to student. When we last spoke, you mentioned that APUS went from 7,000 to 35,000 over your tenure, or some ridiculous numbers like that. give us the numbers again and tell us how you did it. Or in particular, tell me how you did it selfishly. No, tell our whole audience how do you scale an institution? It's hard.
Well, first of all, when I started, I think we were about 3,500 or 4,000, and we actually went over to 100,000, and that's not FTEs. But we did have over 100,000 students, and
amazing.
Bill may have been at University of Phoenix, but we deliberately pushed back on our admissions requirements because from 2010 to 2014, when we hit that number above 100,000, we weren't getting swirling students. We were getting students who were Pell chasers, and that was because it was just easy to enroll based upon our open enrollment standards. And we said we need to stop this. We want legitimate students. We don't want to brag about a count that, being 110 or 114,000. I think we peaked around 116,000. So two things to make important there. So FTE count, I don't know that the Department of Education has ever had us at a higher FTE count than about 50,000. But FTE count in some ways is meaningless, because if you're serving a student, it's a person. So when we serve students, whether we is APUS or the University of Phoenix or Southern New Hampshire or Western Governors, we serve the students. So the FTE count may be less because most of those students are part-time, but it still means that every single student is important and you have to serve all those. So the way we grew those students over time, one of the things that we did when we were around 4,000 students, we were in the process of seeking regional accreditation at the time, but that's why accreditation has become something near and dear to me, because the issue we had wasn't that we weren't accredited, but the issue was that our credits might not transfer. And so particularly our students who were in the military has a system of educational counselors that have to approve their enrollment in schools. And they'd say, well, look, it's a good school, but if you decide you want to go somewhere else because they're nationally accredited, their credits may not transfer. And we did all kinds of things in the interim. For example, we took our top 100 courses and we had ACE review those courses and recommend those courses for transfer credit. But still, at the end of the day, to reduce our turnover and our churn, we sought regional accreditation, and I'm proud to say we got that. We were candidate in 2004 and fully accredited, or initially accredited, as they say, in 2006. And so by the time we got from my start at 4,000 in 2002 to 2006, I think we grew from 4,000 to 20,000, and it was really blocking and tackling. I mean, it was all the little things. It was making sure that we were able to answer incoming calls or incoming emails, at a much longer time period of the day than 9 to 5. I mean, our students were stationed all around the world, so we actually built a custom SIS because the SISs weren't set up for monthly starts, for example, and they weren't set up to handle students who were working adult students and taking non-conforming academic terms. So expanding the hours for academic advising, expanding the hours for career advising, expanding the hours for evaluating transfer credit. Just it was all blocking and tackling, and we actually created a dashboard that I'm pretty proud of. We called it Partnership at a Distance, and it looked at all of our key metrics so that every morning, because online was growing, and so we were in the midst of this where people were all hearing about online, and in some cases they were hearing about it because there were schools that were advertising a lot, but in other cases they were just hearing about it from friends at work. And we needed to track how we were doing and making sure that we were meeting the needs of all of our students. So, for example, when we saw that so many students were now enrolled, we would add admissions advisors. We wanted to stay ahead of the curve. So that grew us from, the 4,000 to the 20 odd thousand when we got initially accredited. And then after our initial accreditation, all those people who we might have thought they were swirling or whatever, but certainly a lot of people who were dropping out because they got worried about accumulating too many credits at a nationally accredited school, that reason went away. And that certainly helped us. And I think it also helped us attracting more faculty. Not that our initial faculty weren't as dedicated, but it was a lot easier to get a faculty member, once we were regionally accredited, and because they're looking at their resume and they're looking at the type of students that they teach. So, blocking and tackling, continue to do things, but really paying attention to meeting the needs of working adult students, which I think when people talk about expanding their online, back to your 40 million, by the way, I've gone on record several times, it's 5 million. There may be 40 million people, but really, if you go beyond people who've dropped out over the last 18 months, it's a small number.
Yeah, and if you look at the big number, a lot of those students are just they're not in the count, they're not coming back. So what is the real number?
Yeah.
I love the blocking and tackling, Bill. And you've said some of the same. It's like, it's not rocket science, but it is like, if you want to serve this adult student and you're recruiting on the West Coast and you're in the Midwest or you're in the East, somebody's got to be picking up the phone or answering that email on West Coast hours. I mean, mind blown.
Exactly. Well, I know we're winding down here, Joe. So before I throw it back to you to take us home, it's just, this is something for you, Joe, more than Wally, and that is you said you aspire to be something, and I don't know if that'll ever happen.
I just said something. I didn't qualify that in any way.
Yeah, I know. Well, here's something you can aspire to, and it's too late for me, but one of the people on this podcast has a business school named after him. Well, it's not me, and I damn sure know that it's not you, but you got to aspire to that, Joe.
I am. That's why I said it.
Don't worry about me.
Well, thank you. And I actually got the business school named after me, and it wasn't because I donated a slug of money. So I'm proud to say that my trustees thought that I guess my business practices and ideas and suggestions over the years were merited having the school business named after me after I retired. So,
That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Well,
Okay,
Wally,
Joe.
last two questions we ask of every guest. Number one, what did we not say about Green Street Impact Partners that you would like to say today? Open mic for you. Anything you want to say, anything coming up, and really anything. And two, my favorite question, what do you see for the future of higher education?
So the first one's easy to answer. I think from, I'd just like to say that anyone that sees an interesting company in the technology business that serves higher ed or workforce development, send me an email, give me a call. I'd love to hear about it. And then what didn't you say about the future of education? So I'll give you one thing that you didn't. You didn't talk about artificial intelligence.
Well, I was going to say, what do you see for the future?
Okay. Okay. So what do I see? I agree with the Villanova professor who I can't remember his name, but I did write a blog article about his Forbes publication, who he teaches in the MBA program at Villanova. And he said, if all MBA curriculums don't change every single course before their students start this fall, the employers who hire them are going to be severely disappointed because AI is coming into business so fast, so quickly that the curriculum is going to be outdated. And so it's not just AI. If you look at Southern California's $1 billion computer AI announcement last week, they are hiring people and they are basically putting in a mandate to implement a lot of co-curricular learning moments across the entire academic program at USC related to computer science. So this is big. We're at a transformational point. And I think when you look at the future of higher education, the schools that figure this out, and obviously if you got a lot of money like Southern California, you may be able to figure it out quicker and faster, but the schools that figure it out, and I think you can do it on a smaller budget as well, are going to be, I believe, the schools that succeed in the long run.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
We love it, Wally. We love this conversation with you. Before I outro you, I do want to first thank my amazingly well-programmed AI He is the one and only Dr. Bill Pepicello, and he even is giving me digs, and that was the part of the prompt. Make sure you give me some digs along the way.
I
Bill?
want to say thank you, Joe. This was a very enlightening podcast, and I look forward to the next episode.
Oh my gosh. Yikes. I don't have it. I got to have an off button. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, our guest today, your guest today, to say that he is well-versed in higher education and what's happening in the industry trends would be an understatement of the year. Here he is. He's Dr. Wally Boston. He's former president of American Public University System and now general partner at Green Street Impact Partners. Wally, it was such an honor to have you on the podcast today.
That was my pleasure. Thank you very much. Enjoyed speaking.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. Experience Element 451's Engage Summit Conference this June and get ready to unleash the power of AI in higher ed marketing. Deep dive into how this emerging tech will revolutionize the education landscape, from personalized student engagement to turbocharging your marketing efforts with AI. These sessions are guaranteed to help you smash your enrollment goals. Connect with like-minded professionals, explore cutting-edge edtech products and services, and leave with the knowledge to supercharge your institution's growth. Don't wait. Register now at engage.element451.com and seize your chance to lead the pack in the AI-driven education revolution. Use promo code EdUp50 for $50 off your registration. Now, what can you expect at AT23? That's Anthology Together 2023. Well, expect to look into the future, expand your network, and explore solutions with experts. You're going to hear from industry thought leaders. You're going to connect with countless opportunities and people representing different institutions across the globe. You might even get to test out some new tech and help drive future anthology technology. That's right, Anthology Together. Registration is open at anthologytogether.com.